Hey, welcome people. I'm on my last day here in St. Louis. I fly home tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all. I hope you're all really well. We're going to continue Mark chapter 8, and I want to continue reading from where we were yesterday. This is how it goes. The disciples had forgotten to bring bread. Remember, they were crossing back over the sea, and they left in haste and forgot to bring some food, except for one loaf that they had with them in the boat. Be careful, Jesus warned them, watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. They discussed this with one another and said, is it because we have no bread? Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of pieces did you pick up? 12, they replied. And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? They answered, 7. He said to them, do you still not understand? I find it interesting, Jesus is giving a very gentle reprimand over here to his disciples about the hardness of their hearts. That's what he calls it. Now there's a great passage in Hebrews chapter 3 that I think is worth mentioning right now. And it's found in verse 7. And the reference that the writer of Hebrews is using here is, do not harden your hearts as the children of Israel did in the wilderness, where God provided for them. He defended them. He protected them. He provided light for them. He provided food for them. And yet despite all that God did for them, their hearts had become hardened. That's an incredible, sad human dilemma, that God, who can do so much for us, can be so disappointed when we become entitled. And we think, well, God needs to do better than this. You know, is this the best that God can do? And we begin to take so lightly the beautiful things that God has done on our behalf. And how that must hurt the heart of God. In the book of Ezekiel, God talks about the nation having a heart of stone, a heart that had been hardened, a heart that had been calloused, a heart that had forgotten all the good things that God had done for them, a heart that failed to remember his goodness in the wilderness, a heart that fails to remember is not going to be long before it becomes a really hard heart. I've met some hard-hearted people, and they've kind of made up their minds that they're not going to believe. And it's not that they didn't once believe, they did believe, but now they've just gone off track because they've gone and taken so for granted the things that God has done for them. And every time you hear the voice of God, and every time you do not respond to God as you should respond, as he sees and he speaks with you, your heart gets harder and harder and harder. And it atrophies. It gets really hard. And that eventually the only way that God can get your attention is with a minor atomic explosion or some crisis to happen in your life that brings you down to earth again and shatters your heart into small little pieces. And sometimes God has to do that to us. He's not being mean, he's just being God, and he's just showing us that a hard heart is not a good thing. But I love the verse where it says there, in Ezekiel 36 verse 22, I will give you a new heart. You see, a hard heart isn't a problem to God. God said, I can take your sin as scarlet and I can turn it as white as wool. I can take your hardened heart and I can give you a heart of flesh. A heart that God can speak into, a heart that is soft towards the things of God, a heart that is open to hear what God is saying, a heart that sees the needs of people around, a heart that is like David's heart, where God said of David, now that man has a heart after my own heart. His heart is like mine because he loves me and he wants to obey me and he wants to love people. And that's the kind of heart that God really wants for each one of us to have. The sad thing is, God sometimes has to come and break your heart. And before he can make it, he has to break it. But when he makes it anew, oh my word, what a beautiful thing. That once hardened heart now becomes soft and malleable in his hands. And he's able to shape you and make you into just the person that he wants you to be. There's one thing I've learned the older I get is never to write anyone off. Never write anyone off. There was the Apostle Paul. He was so gifted, so talented. He had all the abilities in the world. He knew the then Bible off by heart. And here God had to break his heart. God had to shatter his heart in order to make him into that wonderful man of God that written so much of our Bible. But before God could make him, God had to break him. And it's horrible that it has to happen, but that's the way God does it. Maybe you, as I speak today, can identify with what I've just said. Maybe your heart has become broken over certain things. Mine certainly has. And as we respond to a broken heart, it's never a problem with God. He, not like Humpty Dumpty and all the king's horses and all the king's men, couldn't put Humpty together. God can put your heart together again. Whether it's been broken over circumstantial things, whether it's been broken over relational issues, whatever has broken your once hardened heart, God can make it better than it was before. Once you think about that, and if there are aspects of your life that maybe you can remember today when God had to break your heart, man, look at you now. You're better than you were then, aren't you? Isn't that encouraging? Think about that today. Have a great day, people. I'll see you at home. Bye.